All right, so the Toronto condo market is in the toilet. We are circling the drain, maybe even already in the sewers. Today, I want to go through a market update of what we're seeing in the resale market, and even more importantly, what we're seeing in the pre-construction market. Because if the resale market is in the sewers, then keeping with our analogy here, the pre-construction market is practically on a mission to Earth's core, which is a great movie if you haven't seen it. So let's go through these stats. First up, you guys know I love to kick these off with a couple of real life examples. So we've got this building here. This is 75 Queens Wharf, so a building in City Place. So here's the unit here, unit 4205. It just sold in August after 52 days on market for $610,000. Now it last sold in February of 2021 for $760,000. So about a 20% decline in price from 2021 through today. Now next up here, we have a studio. So we've got some studios in Toronto selling on the resale market in the downtown core, around that 400K mark, which is really interesting because some of them are getting really close to the point of cash flowing, or at least cash flowing neutral. So here's the unit here, 251 Jarvis, cute little studio, exactly what you would expect. So 343 square feet. It just sold at the end of August for $419,000. It last sold in 2021 as well, and it sold for $484,000. So only about a 13% decline in price. Now this is interesting here. You can see that at least in December of 2023, for $2,100, okay? So I pulled the floor plan here. Here it is. And this unit, now putting aside the fact that you probably wouldn't really want to invest in a unit this is my opinion, okay? Nobody's suing me. Probably wouldn't want a unit in 251 Jarvis, all right? It's not the best building. Do not send me a cease and desist. I'm sick and tired of the legal letters from property management companies and from developers. I seem to get one every few months at this rate. So I'll make it clear. If you send me your building's a shithole. If you send me a cease and desist, I will dedicate the next 12 sequential videos to doing a full docu-series on interviewing every single person who's lived there and hates the building, okay? Don't send me a cease and desist, please. Your mortgage, $1,855. Your maintenance fees, $331 a month. Property tax, $110. So your total, you're in it for $2,300 a month at current rates, right? And your rent's $2,100. So it doesn't cash flow, it doesn't break even, but it's getting very, very close. And I've seen some that do break even, right? You've got some examples of studios coming in below $400,000. And that is, of course, why the few people who are still wanting to invest in the condo market are doing so on the assignment market and on the resale market, where you can actually get a good deal rather than in the pre-construction market. You can't really fault them for that. So Scott Ingram put this chart out recently on the resale market. We're sitting at about 6.7 months of inventory in the 416, so in Toronto proper, for condos. Now that is firmly in buyer's market territory, and we have been in buyer's market territory for quite some time. Now what's interesting is there's a lot of terminations, right? Because the listings are not selling, they're not selling quickly, or they're not selling at all. And so there's a ton of terminations. So if you adjust for terminations, you're actually talking somewhere in the 8 to 10 months of inventory range, which is just relatively unheard of in Toronto, at least for the last decade. We've never been anywhere near that. Now, our friends over at Stewart Real Estate sent over this chart. So if you look to the sales to new listing ratio, so how many sales are actually happening versus how many new listings are coming to market, you can see that we are now below 30%. What's interesting about this is the last time the condo market had an SNLR below 30% was the 90s. Not exactly a good decade for real estate. What's also interesting is, of course, the drawdown in price that they saw in the 90s was far more dramatic than what we've seen today. You can see sort of our peak pricing for condos, 808 down to 718. However, of course, the counterpoint to that would be the renewed activity we're seeing heading into the fall. And I can speak firsthand about this. Pre-construction isn't really seeing much of a bump in activity, if any at all. It is dead quiet out there. That's why I've been so slow on making videos. There's nothing to talk about. Every time I come on here, there's worse news to give you guys. It's not enjoyable. But regardless, the rate cuts are definitely spurring a little bit of momentum in the resale market. I can see it firsthand. Our team is out with a lot more buyers than they were over the summer and even at the tail end of the spring market there. And so it seems like there's a little bit of renewed optimism now that, the assumption is rate cuts will continue, which I think obviously they probably will. But I've noticed a lot of pre-construction brokers and developers are talking about rate cuts like it's going to bring in all the investors who left because they're scared of condos are suddenly going to come back because of interest rate cuts. And I just don't think that's the reality. We've had stagnant condo prices in the downtown core for 4 or 5 years now. And the cost of construction, while it's come down a little bit in the last year or so, it's still quite elevated. Taxes are really elevated. And so the spread between pre-construction and resale is just at such a place where it's really, I get developers who message me. They're like, hey, you used to make videos specific about projects that you liked. Like, we haven't seen any of those. You haven't done ours. Like, what's up with that? And the thing is, there's nothing really to talk about other than what's cool about the project, what's unique about the project. And most projects aren't honestly all that unique, right? And so I can only talk about your cool chandelier or your Himalayan salt yoga room for so long. Really what the viewers are, at least I think what you guys want to see, is some level of like performance-based metrics. Like, what is it priced at? What's a resale comparable? And when you do those numbers and you put them on video format, it looks atrocious. It's not a sales video. It's whatever the opposite of a sales video is. And so there's really no point in doing them. And so on that note, Urban Nation recently put out a great report on the pre-construction market in the GTA, and I encourage you to go read it. I'll put the link in the description. Lots of interesting charts. I'm just going to share the ones that jumped out at me. New condo sales numbers have absolutely crashed in the GTA. This is probably not news to you. Now, why this matters for the broader housing market in Toronto is that projects have to reach 70% sold before they can qualify for a construction loan in order to build the thing. So now that projects are launching and not achieving 70%, forget 70%. If you achieve 40%, 30% on a launch right now, that's considered a win. Like, that's considered a successful launch comparatively to the other launches, right? And so if you don't achieve 70% sold, which none of them are going to, right? Unless they're in the 905s at $1,000 a square foot with great rental rates and small units or something like that. Sort of like your perfect horse, right? Unless you're launching the perfect horse, like, you're just not going to get there. And if you don't get to 70%, then you don't get your construction loan and you cannot build the condos. And I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but we need homes here in Toronto. Apparently, this is what I'm told. So someone shared this chart on Twitter, and I apologize if you're watching this because I screenshotted it and I can't figure out where I got it from. But anyways, this is the cumulative population growth by decade. So you can see, the 90s, the 2000s, 2010s. And the purple line, pink line, whatever color that is of course the 2020s. I look at a lot of unhinged charts because I follow Dan Foch, but this one really takes the cake. So we can't really build a lot of new homes because nobody's buying them. And we need them because people are pouring in by the hundreds of thousands. At the same time, rental rates are at like nearly all-time highs, a little bit off. Youth unemployment is skyrocketing. GDP per capita is atrocious, right? GDP per capita compared to the US is literally embarrassing. And nobody seems to be like focused on reining this in. We keep hearing that they're going to, and nothing actually happens. Each month we seem to set a new record in inflows. It's just incredible to watch. You have this LMIA scam. This temporary foreign worker. It's literally a scam. Is it not a scam? I feel like it's a scam. The federal government has successfully rebranded slavery and made it cool again, while also depressing wages, destabilizing the housing market, creating a whole bunch of social unrest. Like, I've never seen so much just blatant racism in Canada, all from the party that's most anti-racist or whatever. Anyways, I don't want to get too political here, but it's very unhinged to watch. And then on top of it all, you get these smarty pants on Twitter who love to say, oh yeah, but housing is a provincial issue. And so this is all Ford's fault, has nothing. Of course, hundreds of thousands of people pouring into the country on a monthly basis has nothing to do with housing prices or wage growth. It's just like, okay, all right, smarty pants. Well, the good news for the city of Toronto is there's going to be no development charges to get drunk on because nothing's getting built, okay? You can't sell it, you can't build it. That's just the way it is. Nobody's interested in new condos. I can't blame them. I sell new condos and I can't even make a good argument on why someone would buy one right now. I still like boutique projects is because if you have this boutique site that has some unique features, it has large units or terraced units, or it's only in, 60 unit build, like that kind of stuff gets me excited because that's an end user focused building. And we still have buyers for that stuff. Like, I can tell you one project, I'll give you one example, right? There's a project up in Collingwood called Collingwood Quay. And for 5 or 6 years now, I've had people register on the website every single week for this project, and they're all just waiting to buy. We still have people asking us, when's it going to launch? When's it going to launch? I want to buy. And that's a different type of project. That's a very end user focused project. You have people who want to downsize to Collingwood. You have people who already live in Collingwood. You have people who are buying it as a vacation property. Like, there's a million different reasons why you would buy that. And what's interesting is when I talk to developer friends in Vancouver, they're seeing the same thing. Their boutique sites, 80 units, 110 units, in very scenic areas. Like, I don't know what the Collingwood equivalent is for Vancouver. I'm sure someone will tell me. But sort of those, I guess Whistler, whatever, sort of those areas, those projects, they can sell. They are getting to 80 and 90% sold because there's still demand for that. But on the contrary, and similar to Toronto, their sites in the downtown core of Vancouver, they're not selling at all. Diving into the numbers a little bit closer here. If we look at July new home sales, so low rise, we did 367 units. High rise, we did 287 units. All right, the 10-year average for July is 1,500 units. If you go back to strong years like 2019, 2020, we were over 2,000 units. Just an atrocious showing. The other thing is, this number is actually, it's worse. It's worse. It's 100%, 99% worse than this. Okay, because these are self-reported numbers. It's not the MLS. It's not a real property. There's no title. Nobody really has to report this stuff. So Altus goes through the painstaking process of calling everyone who's selling. How many units did you sell? How many units did you sell? So this is all self-reported. So I don't know what the real number is, but it's lower than 287. Now, year to date, condos, we've sold 3,379 units. Put that in perspective, guys. That's like 7 cookie cutter 50-story buildings, right? That's what we've sold. Of course, it's all spaced out across a bunch of projects. So if some of those units are tied up in 20% sold projects that are just going to cancel anyways, then those units also don't get built. Low rise actually matched condos, so just over 3,300 sales. So what's interesting is low rise pre-construction, there's still quite a demand for it. You can see it on social media if you're someone who engages with housing ads, because you'll get a lot more housing ads for townhomes from the 800s, 5-bedroom townhomes from the 800s, because there's still a lot of investor demand for that. You can see it in the rental pool, right? So if we look at the second quarter rental report and you look at an area like Durham. So second quarter, we did 204 leases, but if you go back to 2017, we did 41. Right, you could probably look at specific submarkets like Newmarket, 2017, 0 leases. Newmarket this year, 43 leases. So why do investors still want to buy cheap small townhomes in 905 markets? Because you can fill them with students. That's why. I don't know if I should say that, but that is why. That's why they're doing it. You can go look at like Brantford leases in 2015 versus Brantford leases this year, and you'll be shocked. People always talk about how small condos are getting. You want an even more interesting data point? It's how small the average bedroom in a newly launched pre-construction townhome project is getting. Now, standing inventory, so unsold inventory at pre-construction projects in Toronto, we are sitting at 17,445 units, condo units, in the Toronto market. So if you're a developer who wants to launch into this market, right? Let's say you have, like a 400 unit building in the 416 and you want to launch into this market and you want to achieve construction financing, because what other point would you want to launch? So you're launching into a market that's absorbing 300 units a month and buyers have 17,445 other units to compare you against on the pre-construction market. And to add a little bit of complexity to that equation, the projects that are already under construction, right? So they're over 70% sold, they've broken ground and they are building the thing. They can get more creative with their incentives than you can as the new launch, because the bank has enough qualified purchasers at 20% down or whatever their terms are with the bank. Now they can kind of sell them however they want. They want to do 5% down, 10% down. They can do that. They have the luxury of doing that because they already have their construction loan. You, as the new launch, you don't have that luxury. And so it's actually harder to be competitive in that space. Now, the Urban Nation report had some other interesting data. So it showed the percentage of newly completed condo investors who were cash flow negative. So you can see back in 2020, about 40% of newly completed units were cash flow negative. And now in 2024, the number is 81%. Worth noting here that repeat buyers, right? So someone who buys their first pre-construction condo, then 5 years later when it closes, they go, wow, I did really well on that. Maybe I'll buy a second for my other kid or whatever. That's not really an appealing decision when the first condo you closed on is negative cash flow on average. So the average unit that closed this year, negative cash flow, $600 a month. And when you look at the distribution here, you can see that 30% of condos closed this year are over $1,000 negative cash flow. Finally, they had this other chart here that showed that studios are faring the best in terms of ownership, in terms of cash flow, right? They're closest to cash flow positive on average for newly completed buildings. This is not really a secret, right? And on the note of buying studios, guys, so remember this one sold for $419. This is just over $1,200 a square foot. Just to talk about premium here. So I fired up Talk Condo Pro, went to the downtown core here, and I just went for any available pre-construction studios sorted by price. And you can see here like why nobody's buying pre-construction versus resale, right? Here's one on Jarvis. This is Regent Park, so Daniels, $1,448 a square. So $550 for 380 square feet. So you're gonna have to pay $125 grand, $130 grand more for a pre-construction studio versus what you can get on the resale market in a recently completed building. And of course, Daniels is notorious for actually being very competitive on price. So although I kind of cherry picked that example, that's like probably one of the best examples I could have given to try to sell you on the idea of pre-construction. And even with cherry picking the best example, of course, Freed Hotel recently launched, different type of product, but $2,200 a square foot. So it's just difficult to make sense of buying pre-construction for anyone. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, Jordan, if they can't sell these condos, these greedy developers perhaps should just lower the price. I wish it were that easy. I would love to have something to sell people. Believe me, I would love to have some product to shove down your throat, but nothing's a good deal right now. I have nothing for you, okay? If you call me up, I'm going to tell you to go skin someone alive on the assignment market. That's where you're going to find your best deal. Or just hunt around and lowball a bunch of resale till something gives. So developer profit 15%. Then you have other government fees 14.75, and then you have development charges 8.2. And on that note, friends of the channel, Matt Young and Republic Developments have led a coalition. So the coalition against new home taxes. So there's Republic, and there's all of the other developers that have signed on that basically say, we will pass on directly to the consumer any savings in the form of development charge and tax cuts. So let's look at what that would actually look like. So this is a sample project pro forma that Republic put together on a site. So you can see that the total cost is $822,000 on average per unit. The government costs make up $240,000. If you want to read through this, I encourage you to do that. I will again put the link. So people have asked me, hey, if something actually happens here, like, will that make a difference in the pre-construction market? And my honest answer is yes, a huge one. The price premium is the biggest factor, right? It's the biggest reason that people look at pre-construction, they look at a price list and they throw it out, right? It's because like it's disgusting. The price premium is literally disgusting. It's like, oh, hey, yeah, let me pay 30% more than something's worth just because it's going to be ready in 5 years instead of today. Oh, and by the way, condo prices over the last 4 years haven't increased at all. This sounds like a great decision, right? So the current big boy launch is the Clove. So this one's coming up. I can't remember the launch date, but it's this fall market. You've probably seen the ads for it and the emails go out. So it's over at Cloverdale Mall. It's right here. And we're being told $1,100 a square foot. Now, I don't know how well it's going to do at $1,100 a square foot, right? It's a lot cheaper than the downtown core product, but it is, you have to wait a while before the rest of the development is done. You are at Cloverdale Mall. You're sort of very similar in positioning to the Valhalla, the Edelcan buildings over there, which sold really well, but obviously at a much lower price per square foot. So do I think it'll do well? I'm not sure. I don't think so. Not if 1,100 square foot is accurate. I think they need to be at 1,000 or a little bit under 1,000 in order to actually sell very well. Taxes, fees, and the interest carry on the taxes and fees makes up almost 30% of the price of a unit, right? So when you go buy a unit, 30% of that makes its way to the government in some way, shape, or form, right? You can see the breakdown of municipal, provincial, and federal here. So if those units, we're only talking about, to get to $950 a foot, we're only talking about a 15% reduction in price. So if the government got together and did something useful, said, hey, look, we'll bring DCs down to 0 and HST in half or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how the government works. I'm just making stuff up. But hey, we'll cut this 30% portion down to 15%, as long as those savings are directly passed to the consumer, dollar for dollar. Would that make a difference on a launch like this? 100%. I think at $950 a foot, it would do really well. So anyways, that's sort of my 2 cents. Do I think this will actually happen? I don't have a lot of faith in the government. This is kind of what needs to happen, the cost of pre-construction has to come down to a place where the average buyer can look at the price list and go, that makes sense. And today we're just not there. So I'll leave you there, and I will see you guys next week for more charts and ramblings.